Deep space felt cold and empty near the forgotten area called Sector 19. No trade ships traveled there. No rescue teams entered the dark zone. Even dangerous pirates stayed far away. People across the galaxy whispered stories about this place. Some believed strange creatures moved in the dark between broken stations. Others believed something much worse waited there in silence. 20 years earlier, a secret research station called Black Veil Laboratory suddenly vanished from every official system. Its lights turned off without warning. Its scientists stopped answering messages. Its security signals disappeared in the middle of normal reports. One moment the station was alive. The next moment it became silent forever. After that day, the Galactic Council blocked the whole area and ordered every ship to stay away. No one explained what happened. No one spoke about the scientists again. Only rumors survived. Some people said the station created living alien weapons. Others said the scientists lost control of their own experiments. But nobody truly knew the truth. Far away from safe space routes, a small human salvage ship moved slowly through the darkness. The ship looked old and tired. Scratches covered its metal body. One engine worked badly and released weak blue sparks. Its name was Iron Ghost. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elias Kane sat quietly while checking broken screens. He was not rich. He was not famous. He only worked hard to survive by finding damaged ships and selling useful parts. His dark jacket looked worn after many years in space. Tired eyes watched the navigation map again and again. Then the screen suddenly blinked red. "Navigation system offline," the computer voice said. Elias sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Of course," he muttered quietly. "Something always breaks at the worst time." Across from him, Engineer Marcus looked nervous. He pressed buttons quickly while checking ship systems. "Captain," Marcus said slowly, "I think we are lost." Elias looked up. "How lost?" he asked. Marcus swallowed hard before answering. "Very lost." The cockpit became silent for a moment. Then Marcus slowly turned another screen toward Elias. A location warning flashed across it in bright red letters. "SECTO, R19 restricted zone." Elias stared at the words. "No," he whispered. Marcus nodded nervously. "Yes, behind them." Pilot Sarah suddenly stood up. "You mean that Sector 19?" she asked. Nobody answered because everyone already knew. Cold silence filled the room. Marcus looked toward the dark space outside the window. "We should leave now," he said quickly. "I hate this place already." Before Elias could answer, warning alarms suddenly echoed through the ship. Beep, beep, beep. Sarah moved to her controls. "What now?" she asked. Marcus checked radar readings, then froze. "There is something ahead," he whispered. The main screen slowly activated. At first it looked like nothing more than darkness. Then shapes slowly appeared. A giant station floated silently in space. Its metal walls looked broken and burned. Half of the outer lights were dead. Pieces of damaged metal floated around it like forgotten bones. Elias slowly stood from his chair. "No way," he said softly. Marcus looked pale. "It's Black Veil Laboratory," he whispered. Nobody moved. The station looked dead, cold, silent, abandoned. Yet somehow it felt alive. Like something hidden inside still watched the darkness. Sarah crossed her arms nervously. "We leave," she said immediately. "Right now." Before Elias could reply, the speakers suddenly crackled with static. "Correct!" Everyone jumped. Marcus looked shocked. "I didn't touch anything," he said quickly. The static grew louder. Broken sounds filled the cockpit. Then suddenly, something impossible happened. A soft sound echoed through the speakers. Someone crying, not an adult, not an alarm, a child. Soft crying filled the room, small and scared. Like someone hiding alone in the dark, nobody spoke. Sarah slowly turned toward Marcus. "Tell me this is fake," she whispered. Marcus shook his head immediately. "It's coming from the station," he said. Elias stared at the giant broken laboratory outside. "That station has been dead for 20 years, Sarah said quietly. "No child could survive there." But the crying continued, weak, lonely, heartbreaking. Then the sound suddenly stopped. Silence returned. For one long moment, nobody breathed. Then a tiny voice whispered through the speakers, soft and shaking, "Please." The crew froze. The voice sounded scared, young, alone. Then the whisper came again, weaker this time. "Please? Don't leave me here." Outside the window, Black Veil Laboratory floated silently in endless darkness. And for the first time in many years, Captain Elias Kane felt fear crawl slowly into his chest. Red warning lights flashed across the dark halls of Black Veil Laboratory. Cold emergency alarms echoed through the station, again and again, making the silent place feel alive. Inside the docking bay, Captain Elias Kane slowly lowered his weapon while staring toward the long metal corridor ahead. The weak voice from the speaker still echoed inside his mind. "Please, don't leave me here." Behind him, Marcus looked terrified. "This place is wrong," he whispered. "We heard a child inside a dead station." Pilot Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle. "We should go back to the ship," she said quickly. "Nothing good is waiting here." But Elias continued looking down the hallway. The corridor walls were covered with deep claw marks. Old bloodstains darkened the floor. Broken security drones lay scattered everywhere like destroyed metal insects. Something terrible happened here long ago. Then suddenly, KRRRRK. A loud metal sound echoed somewhere deep inside the station. Everyone instantly raised their weapons. Marcus nervously looked around. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Before anyone answered, the station speaker suddenly activated again. "This way." The small voice whispered softly. Sarah looked shocked. "She's guiding us." Elias slowly walked forward. The others followed carefully behind him while emergency lights flashed across the ruined halls. As they moved deeper into the laboratory, they passed shattered glass rooms filled with strange equipment. Some walls had warning signs written in multiple alien languages. Others showed burned symbols from old experiments. Marcus stopped near a destroyed computer terminal. "Captain," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Dust covered the cracked screen, but one file still worked. Elias opened it. Project X-13 Biological Weapon Program. Sarah frowned. "Weapon program," she repeated softly. Marcus continued reading, his face slowly turning pale. "Subject displays extreme aggression under stress. Energy output capable of destroying military units. Emotional instability remains the largest problem." Marcus looked up nervously. "Captain." Whatever made that voice might not be human. Suddenly the hallway lights turned off. Darkness swallowed everything. Sarah cursed quietly. Then small emergency lights slowly activated along the floor, creating weak red shadows across the station and far ahead in the darkness. A door slowly opened by itself. Hiss, cold air escaped from the room beyond it. The tiny voice returned again. "Here." Nobody wanted to move, but Elias stepped forward anyway. Inside the room stood a giant glass containment pod surrounded by broken machines and hanging cables. Frost covered most of the glass surface. Something small sat inside, curled up tightly in the corner. Sarah carefully aimed her rifle. "Oh God," she whispered. Inside the pod was a little alien girl. She looked no older than 8 years old. Her silver skin looked pale and weak under the dim lights. Long white hair covered part of her face. Small glowing lines moved slowly beneath her skin like soft blue light. But the strangest thing was her eyes. Large glowing blue eyes filled with fear. Not anger, not violence, fear. The girl looked at the humans like a trapped animal waiting to be hurt again. Marcus took a small step backward. "That's Experiment X-13, he whispered. Suddenly nearby computer screens activated automatically. "Warning, primary subject active." Sarah immediately pointed her weapon directly at the pod. "Captain," she said sharply, "step away from it." The alien girl instantly flinched at Sarah's voice and pressed herself harder against the corner of the glass pod. She looked terrified. Elias noticed her hands shaking badly. Then he saw something unexpected. Chains, small metal restraints still covered the girl's wrists. The inside of the pod looked less like protection and more like a prison. Marcus quickly opened more research files. The information made his face lose all color. "Captain." These reports say she killed armed soldiers. Sarah tightened her finger near the trigger. We leave now, she warned, or we end this thing before it wakes fully. The alien girl suddenly lowered her head after hearing those words. Like she understood them, Elias slowly walked closer to the pod. Easy, Sarah warned, but Elias ignored her. The little alien girl looked up at him silently. Fear filled her glowing eyes. Then she quietly whispered one word. Hurt. Elias froze. The girl slowly touched the chains around her wrists. Hurt, she repeated weakly. For a moment, nobody spoke. Marcus looked disturbed. She can barely talk, he said softly. Elias looked around the destroyed laboratory again. At the broken restraints, the damaged medical machines, the old bloodstains on the floor. This was not a normal experiment room. This was a torture chamber. The alien girl carefully watched Elias as if waiting for him to attack her too. Instead, Elias slowly lowered his weapon completely. Then he stepped closer to the control panel beside the containment pod. Sarah's eyes widened immediately. Captain, she said nervously, don't do that. Elias looked quietly at the frightened child inside the glass prison. Then he placed his hand on the release controls. She's not acting like a weapon, he said softly. The alien girl stared at him silently. She's acting like a scared little girl. Then Elias pressed the release button. Hisses, the containment pod slowly began opening. And deep somewhere inside the station, something massive suddenly roared in the darkness. Cold air escaped from the opening containment pod while red warning lights flashed across the laboratory walls. Nobody inside the room moved. Sarah kept her rifle aimed forward. Marcus stepped backward nervously, but Captain Elias Kane continued standing beside the control panel, watching the small alien girl carefully. The little girl remained frozen inside the pod. Her glowing blue eyes moved between the humans like she expected pain at any second. Then another deep roar echoed somewhere far below the station. The metal floor trembled slightly. Marcus looked terrified. Captain, something else is inside this station, he whispered. But Elias focused only on the child, slowly, carefully. The alien girl stepped out of the pod. Her bare feet touched the cold laboratory floor for the first time in years. She looked weak, thin, fragile. Nothing about her looked dangerous. The moment Sarah moved slightly, the girl instantly flinched and backed away in fear. Elias noticed it immediately. She's afraid of us, he said quietly. Sarah lowered her rifle, but still looked nervous. You saw those files, she replied. That thing killed soldiers. The alien girl suddenly looked down after hearing the word thing, like she understood exactly what Sarah meant. For a moment, sadness crossed her face. Elias slowly removed his jacket and carefully held it out toward her. The girl stared at it silently, unsure what to do. Then very slowly, she accepted it with shaking hands and wrapped it around herself. Marcus watched quietly. She's freezing, he said softly. The station alarms continued screaming around them. Warning, security failure, primary subject released. Suddenly every screen inside the laboratory activated at once. A face appeared across the monitors. An older human man wearing an imperial military uniform. His cold gray eyes stared directly at them through the screens. Captain Elias immediately recognized the symbol on his uniform, the Galactic Empire. The officer spoke calmly. This is Commander Vale of Imperial Intelligence. His voice echoed through the laboratory speakers. If you wish to survive, return experiment X-13 immediately. Sarah looked shocked. The Empire knew she was here. Commander Vale continued speaking. That subject is extremely dangerous. The alien girl lowered her head again after hearing those words. Elias noticed her hands slowly shaking harder. She is not a subject, Elias replied coldly. She's a child. Commander Vale's expression did not change. You know nothing about what that creature truly is, he answered. Then another screen displayed old security footage from the laboratory. Elias watched in silence. In the video, armed soldiers fired weapons inside a burning hallway. Scientists screamed while alarms echoed everywhere. Then a wave of glowing blue energy exploded through the corridor, throwing soldiers against walls like broken dolls. The footage ended suddenly. Marcus looked pale. "My God," he whispered. Commander Vale spoke again. "Experiment X-13 destroyed over 50 trained soldiers during the incident 20 years ago." Sarah slowly raised her rifle again, uncertainty filling her face. But Elias looked back at the small girl standing beside the pod. She looked terrified by the footage, like she hated those memories too. Then Elias noticed something important. The girl was staring at the dead scientists in the recording, not the soldiers. Fear filled her glowing eyes. Not pride, not anger, fear. Commander Vale's voice became harder. "Return the weapon peacefully," he ordered, "or your ship will be destroyed when you attempt to leave Sector 19. Marcus looked at Elias nervously. "Captain, maybe we should listen." The little alien girl suddenly grabbed the back of Elias's jacket tightly. Everyone froze. She hid partly behind him like a frightened child hiding behind a parent. Then she whispered softly, "Don't." The single word felt painfully human. Elias looked down at her small shaking hands gripping his jacket. And in that moment, he made his decision. "We're leaving," he said firmly. Sarah looked shocked. "You can't be serious. She spent her entire life trapped in this place." Elias replied, "I'm not handing her back to people who treated her like a weapon." Commander Vale's eyes narrowed coldly across the screens. "You are making a terrible mistake, Captain." Elias ignored him. As the crew prepared to leave the laboratory, the alien girl stayed close behind Elias silently, never letting go of his jacket. The dark hallways felt even colder now. Emergency lights flashed across broken walls while distant metal sounds echoed through the station. Something moved somewhere far below them. Halfway through the corridor, the girl suddenly stopped walking. Her glowing eyes widened slightly. Elias looked back at her. "What is it?" he asked quietly. The girl stared toward the darkness ahead. Then she whispered one soft word, "Hungry." Before anyone could react, loud explosions suddenly shook the station. Boom! The entire hallway trembled violently. Marcus nearly fell against the wall. "What was that?" he shouted. Then Sarah looked toward the station windows and froze. Outside the glass, massive warships slowly emerged from the darkness of space. Black Imperial destroyers surrounded Black Veil Laboratory from every direction. Dozens of weapons powered up at once, and over the station speakers, Commander Vale spoke one final time. "No ship leaves this sector," he said coldly. "Bring me the girl." Imperial warships surrounded Black Veil Laboratory like giant metal predators waiting for prey. Inside the damaged corridors, Captain Elias Kane and his crew ran quickly toward the docking bay, while emergency alarms screamed around them. Marcus checked the station map on a small scanner with shaking hands. "The fastest route is through the lower maintenance halls," he said nervously. Sarah looked back toward the windows. "They are preparing boarding teams already," she warned. "We don't have much time." Behind Elias, the small alien girl stayed close beside him silently, still wearing his old jacket. Her glowing eyes moved carefully across every hallway, like she expected danger from every shadow. Suddenly the lights flickered again. Then the entire station shook violently. Boom! Dust fell from the ceiling while metal pipes burst nearby, releasing steam into the corridor. Marcus grabbed the wall to steady himself. "The Empire is forcing entry," he shouted. Elias looked toward the frightened girl. "We keep moving," he ordered. The group quickly entered the lower maintenance sector. This part of the station looked even worse than the laboratories above. Broken cables hung from ceilings. Dark bloodstains covered old walls. Destroyed security robots lay everywhere. The deeper they moved, the colder the station became. Then suddenly, the alien girl stopped walking. Elias noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked softly. The girl stared ahead into the darkness. Before anyone understood her warning, armed Imperial soldiers suddenly appeared from both ends of the corridor. "Don't move," one soldier shouted. Bright weapon lights instantly filled the hallway. Sarah raised her rifle immediately while Marcus backed away in panic. The soldiers aimed directly at the little alien girl. "There she is," one of them said coldly. The girl instantly froze in fear. Her breathing became fast. Her small hand started shaking badly. Elias stepped in front of her protectively. "She's just a child. Experiment X-13, the commander said firmly. "You will return to Imperial custody immediately." The girl suddenly grabbed Elias's jacket tightly from behind. "No," she whispered weakly. One soldier moved forward and reached toward her arm. The moment his hand touched her, everything exploded with blue light. Boom! A massive energy wave blasted through the corridor like a storm. Imperial soldiers were thrown violently against the walls, weapons shattered across the floor. Metal doors bent outward from the force. Marcus screamed and covered his face while Sarah crashed against a control panel nearby. The lights above them burst instantly. Then silence returned. Smoke slowly filled the hallway. Elias forced himself back onto his feet, coughing hard. "Everyone okay?" he shouted. Marcus groaned weakly from the floor. "I think so." Sarah slowly stood up beside the broken wall. Blue energy moved wildly around her body like living fire. Her glowing eyes looked brighter than before. The floor beneath her feet had cracked apart. Around her, unconscious Imperial soldiers lay scattered everywhere. The little girl stared at her own hands in horror, like she did not understand what she had done. Then suddenly she looked up at Elias. Fear filled her eyes again. "Hurt," she whispered shakily. The glowing energy around her body started growing stronger. Sarah slowly lifted her weapon again, fear crossing her face. "Captain," she warned quietly, but Elias quickly stepped forward. "No," he said firmly. The girl backed away immediately, terrified. Blue energy sparked around her again, making the walls shake violently. Elias raised both hands slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Listen to me," he said calmly. "You are safe." The girl's breathing remained fast and uneven. "No hurt," she whispered desperately. Elias carefully walked closer despite the dangerous energy surrounding her. "Nobody here wants to hurt you," he said softly. The girl stared at him silently. Tears slowly formed in her glowing eyes. Then very quietly, she asked something that made the entire hallway feel colder. "Monster?" The single word broke something inside Elias. This child truly believed she was nothing more than a weapon. Nothing more than a monster. Elias slowly shook his head. "No," he answered gently. "You are not a monster." The girl stared at him silently for several long seconds. Then the blue energy around her slowly faded away. Her small legs suddenly became weak. Before she could fall, Elias caught her carefully in his arms. The little girl trembled badly while hiding her face against his shoulder, like she expected him to push her away after seeing her powers, but Elias held her safely instead. "You're okay," he said quietly, for the first time since leaving the containment pod. The girl stopped shaking slightly. Marcus looked stunned by everything he had just witnessed. "She destroyed an entire squad without trying," he whispered. Sarah slowly lowered her weapon, though fear still remained in her eyes. Then Marcus noticed something on one of the fallen soldiers' data tablets. "Captain," he said nervously, "you need to see this." Elias walked over while still holding the exhausted girl carefully. The tablet displayed classified Imperial files. Project X-13 status. Active. But below, it was something far worse. Additional surviving subjects detected. Sarah frowned immediately. Additional subjects? Marcus slowly looked up from the screen, fear growing on his face. "There are more children like her," he whispered. Then suddenly, deep below the station, another roar echoed through the darkness. This one sounded larger, angrier, far more dangerous. And the little alien girl hiding in Elias's arms whispered one terrified word. "Brother." The deep roar echoed through the station again. The sound felt so powerful that the metal walls around them trembled slightly. Captain Elias Kane looked down at the frightened alien girl hiding against his chest. Her small hands tightly held his jacket, while fear filled her glowing blue eyes. "Brother," she whispered again weakly. Marcus stared nervously into the dark hallway ahead. He asked quietly. The little girl slowly nodded. Sarah looked disturbed. "You mean the Empire made more children like you?" she asked carefully. The girl stayed silent for a moment before speaking softly. "Many." Cold silence filled the ruined corridor. Broken weapons and unconscious Imperial soldiers still covered the floor around them. Smoke drifted slowly through the damaged hallway lights. For years the galaxy believed this station was abandoned, dead, empty. But the truth was much worse. Children had suffered here. Children turned into living weapons. Suddenly, Marcus checked the stolen Imperial data tablet again. "There's more," he said nervously. The screen displayed several classified files, each marked with warning symbols. Subject X09. Status unknown. Subject X12. Transferred. Subject X15. Active combat unit. Sarah frowned while reading. "They gave them numbers instead of names," she said quietly. The alien girl lowered her head after hearing that. Like she remembered those numbers too well, Elias knelt carefully beside her. "What is your real name?" he asked softly. For a moment, the girl looked confused, as if nobody had ever asked her that before. Then very quietly she answered, "Lyra." Elias gave a small nod. "That's a good name," he said gently. The little girl stared at him silently, surprised by his kindness. Before anyone could speak again, loud explosions suddenly shook the station. Boom! Emergency lights flashed wildly across the corridor. Marcus looked at his scanner in panic. "Imperial boarding teams are entering every level," he shouted. "They're searching the entire station." Sarah immediately grabbed her rifle. "We need to reach the ship now," she said firmly. But Lyra suddenly stepped backward nervously. "No ship," she whispered. Elias looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" he asked. Lyra slowly pointed deeper into the station, toward the lower laboratory sectors. "Children," she whispered softly. Marcus froze. "You think more experiment children are still here?" Lyra nodded slowly. Fear crossed Sarah's face immediately. "We can't stay here," she argued. "The Empire will trap us." But Elias looked toward the dark lower halls thoughtfully. If children were still alive inside this nightmare, he could not abandon them, not after seeing what happened to Lyra. He made his decision quietly. "We find them," he said. Sarah looked shocked. "Captain, this place is falling apart. And those kids will die if we leave them here," Elias replied firmly. Marcus sighed nervously. "One day your kindness is going to get us all killed," he muttered. Despite his fear, he followed anyway. The group carefully moved deeper into Black Veil Laboratory. Huge metal doors blocked old testing rooms. Warning signs covered the walls in both human and alien languages. Some doors had deep claw marks ripped through solid steel. Others looked melted from powerful energy blasts. As they walked, Lyra stayed very close beside Elias. Every loud sound made her flinch nervously. Every flashing light seemed to remind her of painful memories. Then suddenly, she stopped walking again. Her glowing eyes focused on a nearby metal door. "Inside," she whispered. Marcus checked the scanner carefully. "There are life signs behind this wall," he said in surprise. Sarah moved toward the control panel and forced the damaged door open. Hiss! Cold air escaped from the dark room beyond it. Inside, several small containment pods stood in silence. Most were broken or empty, but one pod still worked. And inside it sat a tiny alien boy with pale green skin and frightened golden eyes. He looked no older than 6 years old. The moment he saw humans, he immediately backed against the far corner of the pod in terror. "No hurt," he cried weakly. Lyra slowly stepped closer to the glass. The little boy stared at her glowing eyes in shock. Then tears filled his face. "Sister," he whispered softly. Lyra touched the glass gently. Marcus quietly looked around the room again. Then his face slowly lost color. "Captain," he whispered. Elias turned toward him. Marcus pointed toward the shadows deeper inside the chamber. More containment pods slowly became visible in the darkness, rows and rows of them, some large, some small. And inside many of them were children from different alien races, cold, frightened, and alone. Sarah looked horrified. "My God." Then suddenly every alarm inside the room activated at once. Warning: primary security lockdown engaged. Massive steel doors slammed shut behind them. Boom! The lights turned blood red. And Commander Vale's cold voice echoed through hidden speakers once again. "Thank you for locating the remaining subjects for us, Captain Kane," he said calmly. Then heavy footsteps echoed somewhere outside the chamber. Not human footsteps, something larger, much larger. Heavy footsteps echoed outside the locked chamber. Slow, powerful, and unnatural. Inside the containment room, frightened alien children pressed themselves deeper into their pods while red emergency lights flashed across the walls. Commander Vale's cold voice still echoed through the speakers. "The subjects belong to the Empire," he said calmly. "You should not have interfered." Elias stepped protectively in front of Lyra and the other children. "They are children," he answered angrily. "Not weapons." For the first time, Commander Vale's voice carried slight irritation. "You still fail to understand," he replied. "These experiments were created to save humanity from future wars." Sarah looked disgusted. "So you tortured kids for military weapons?" She shouted. No answer came. Instead, the heavy footsteps outside suddenly stopped. "I have a very bad feeling about this," he whispered. Then the massive steel doors bent inward violently. Boom. The entire room shook as something slammed against the other side with terrifying force. Small alien children screamed inside their containment pods. Another impact hit the doors, harder this time. Cross. Thick metal started tearing apart like paper. Marcus stared in horror. "What kind of monster can do that?" "He's here," she whispered shakily. The doors exploded inward a second later. The creature looked partly human and partly alien, tall enough to nearly touch the ceiling. Its body covered in dark armor-like skin, glowing with blue energy lines. But the most disturbing thing was its face. It still looked young, not like a monster, not fully. Its glowing eyes scanned the room motionlessly until they stopped on Lyra. The giant figure spoke in a cold, calm voice. "X-13. Lyra immediately stepped behind Elias, broken far worse than Lyra. Commander Vale's voice returned proudly through the speakers. "Allow me to introduce Subject X-01, he announced. "The first successful experiment." Marcus looked horrified. "That thing is a child?" he whispered. X-01 slowly walked into the room while staring only at Lyra. Every step cracked the floor beneath him. Unlike Lyra, there was no fear in his eyes, no sadness, no emotion at all, only emptiness. "You should have stayed gone," he continued. Sarah slowly aimed her rifle, though her hands shook slightly. Elias quickly stopped her. "That won't help," he whispered. The giant experiment suddenly looked toward Elias. For several seconds he simply stared at the human captain silently. Then he asked something unexpected. "Why are you protecting her?" Elias answered immediately. "Because she deserves better than this place." X-01 tilted his head slightly. Confused by the answer, Commander Vale interrupted coldly. "X-01, eliminate the intruders and recover the subjects." The massive experiment did not move. Instead, he continued staring at Elias. "You are risking your life for weapons," he said quietly. Elias slowly shook his head. "They are not weapons." Something changed slightly in X-01's expression, confusion, as if the idea itself felt strange to him. Scared, hopeful, waiting. Then one tiny alien boy inside a nearby pod softly spoke. "Please." The small voice echoed through the chamber. X-01 slowly turned toward the frightened child. The little boy trembled under the giant experiment's gaze. "Don't hurt us," he whispered weakly. The room became silent again. Something strange happened then. The glowing energy lines across X-01's body flickered slightly, like his emotions were becoming unstable. Commander Vale noticed it immediately. "X-01, he ordered sharply. "Complete your mission now." But the giant experiment still did not move. Instead, he looked slowly around the chamber, at the terrified children, at the containment pods, at the fear in every small face around him. Then finally his eyes returned to Lyra. "She fears humans," he said quietly. Elias looked at the frightened girl beside him. "She feared everyone," he answered softly, "until someone finally treated her like a person." Silence followed. Then suddenly warning alarms screamed across the entire station. Warning: reactor failure detected. Marcus checked his scanner in panic. The station reactor is collapsing, he shouted. This whole place is going to explode. Commander Vale's voice instantly became furious. Recover the subjects immediately, he ordered. But XO1 slowly turned away from the speakers. For the first time in his life, uncertainty filled his glowing eyes. Then he quietly asked Elias a question no experiment had ever asked before. What is a family? Warning alarms screamed across Black Veil Laboratory, while the entire station shook violently around them. Deep inside the walls, the dying reactor released dangerous waves of heat and energy. Emergency lights flashed red across frightened faces. Captain Elias Kane looked at the giant experiment standing in front of him. XO1 still waited silently for an answer. What is a family? He asked quietly again. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even Sarah and Marcus looked shocked by the question. A creature feared across secret military files. Yet deep inside, he was still only a child who never experienced love. Elias slowly stepped closer to him. The station trembled violently again. Boo! But Elias continued speaking calmly. A family does not chain you. A family does not treat you like a tool. And a family never leaves you alone in the dark. The words echoed through the silent chamber. XO1 stared at Elias without moving. Then slowly, his glowing eyes shifted toward the terrified alien children trapped inside the containment pods. Small, frightened faces looked back at him. For years those children only knew fear, pain, experiments, loneliness just like him. Commander Vale's angry voice suddenly exploded through the speakers. XO1, he shouted. Kill them immediately. The giant experiment remained silent. Then for the first time in many years, he disobeyed an order. No. You belong to the Empire, he yelled. XO1 slowly looked upward toward the hidden speakers. His glowing energy lines flickered violently now. No, he repeated. We belong to you. Suddenly the chamber doors burst open behind them. Imperial soldiers rushed inside with heavy weapons raised. Secure the subjects. Sarah instantly fired toward the soldiers, while Marcus rushed toward the control systems beside the containment units. We need to free these kids now, Marcus shouted. Blaster fire filled the chamber. Smoke spread rapidly through the room, but in the middle of the chaos, even trained Imperial troops feared him. Commander Vale screamed through the speakers again. XO1, obey your mission. The giant experiment slowly turned toward the soldiers instead. Then he raised one massive hand. A powerful wave of blue energy exploded across the chamber. Imperial soldiers were thrown backward violently. Weapons shattered against the walls. Metal doors twisted apart like paper. Hissa, pod after pod slowly opened across the chamber. Scared and confused, some cried quietly. Others hid behind Elias and Sarah immediately. Lyra quickly moved toward the younger children, trying to comfort them softly. For the first time, she was no longer the frightened child hiding from the world. Now she protected others too. Suddenly, Marcus checked the reactor warnings again and turned pale. Captain, he shouted, we have less than 10 minutes before the station explodes. Elias nodded immediately. We move now, he ordered. The group rushed toward the damaged exit corridor while explosions echoed through the collapsing station. 1001 followed behind silently, protecting the children from falling debris and damaged security drones. But every time soldiers appeared, XO1 stood between them and the children like a shield. The Empire's perfect weapon had finally chosen what he wanted to protect. Family. At last the group reached the docking bay where the Iron Ghost waited. Smoke covered the entire area while warning sirens screamed endlessly around them. Sarah quickly powered up the ship engines while Marcus helped frightened children inside. Elias turned back one final time, searching for XO1. The giant experiment still stood outside the ship near the collapsing docking doors. Come on, Elias shouted. There's still time. But XO1 slowly shook his head. The reactor will destroy the station, he said calmly. Massive emergency doors were slowly closing automatically because of reactor failure. If they shut completely, the Iron Ghost would never escape in time. Lyra suddenly ran toward him, tears filling her glowing eyes. "Brother," she whispered painfully. XO1 looked down at her quietly. For the first time, a small gentle expression appeared on his face. "You were always stronger than me," he told her softly. Then he placed one hand against the closing blast door and stopped it with pure strength. The metal around him screamed under the pressure. Elias understood immediately what he planned to do. "You don't have to stay," he said firmly. But XO1 looked toward the children safely boarding the ship. "Yes," he answered quietly. "I do." The station began collapsing around him. Fire spread across the ceiling. Explosions shook the docking bay again and again. Then XO1 looked at Elias one final time. "You showed us what humans could be," he said softly. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to save him too. But the giant experiment already pushed the blast doors fully open with a final roar. "Go!" he shouted. The iron ghost launched into space seconds later, behind them. Black Veil Laboratory exploded in a massive wave of blue light that lit the darkness of space like a dying star. Inside the ship, frightened alien children watched silently through the windows. Lyra stood beside Elias quietly, tears falling down her face. Then slowly, she reached for his hand, and for the first time, she finally whispered the word she had never believed she would say, "Father."